imposters. Very good morning. And so, for those of you just tuning in, YuLife, my name is Sam. I'm co-founder, COO of YuLife. YuLife is an insurance company that inspires people to live longer, happier, healthier lives. We sell life insurance, income protection, dental insurance, health insurance to companies across the UK. But most importantly, combined with well-being that inspires people every day to do something to improve their health and well-being. And in that vein, it is really such a pleasure to have Tom with us to talk a bit more about his story.
Yes.
And Tom, welcome. Good morning. Hey.
Thank you for having me. I was a little bit rushed after the school drop-off this morning, but I made it here just in time, so.
We had a 3-minute window. It was all good, guys. It was all under control.
We did some guided meditation, so I've got some like Ucoin after that, right?
Perfect. You nailed it.
Yeah,
exactly. So look, of course, Tom needs no introduction from me. Gold medal winning Olympian, accomplished author, and many other accolades that I could go on about. But honestly, many of us go through high pressure situations, and many of us feel like we've got a lot of expectations around us, and especially around our jobs if they're stressful. But I don't think anything can quite, or that I've gone through, can quite compete with having the weight of the nation's expectations on your shoulders, standing there diving for the country. What's it like when you're in such a high pressure scenario, Tom?
It is. I used to find it completely terrifying, if I'm being honest. I didn't really know what to expect. My first Olympic Games was in 2008, and I was 14, so I had no idea what I was doing. So I was just like, I'll go and do some dives and like enjoy it while I'm there. But then 2012 was a completely different scenario because 4 years later, I was then 18. It was also a home Olympic Games, so it was in London. So there's all that expectation and pressure for Brits to win medals, which has added like an extra level of like fear, really. But then also going into it, because you want it so badly, you often end up torturing yourself through the whole experience because you want to do well so badly that you overthink every single thing. And I did the same in 2016 as well. There was so much pressure. And I think that once I got to Tokyo, I was then a father, I was a husband, I had my family, and I had, we had just been through the pandemic, and we had this, I felt like I had a sense of perspective of what really matters most, because normally going into those competitions, you train for 4 years, and it comes down to one day. Like, no matter how many dives you've done in training, no matter how good of form that you're in, if you wake up on that day and your leg's sore, you've got to deal with it, and you've got to figure out how you are going to perform your best on that one day. Because if you mess up any one dive, you've got to wait another 4 years. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's quite intense. Meditation, mindfulness, meditation, and knitting for me helped. Yeah. But yeah, there's lots of things that we have to learn through sports psychology to be able to figure out our routine and our way of being able to just zone everything else out.
I can only imagine how intense that must be, that feeling of performance. I have, before big meetings, a bit of performance anxiety. I'm like nervous about what my board will think. That's a room of like 10 people.
Yeah, but it happens in every, and it's not just because, the Olympics is like a very big stage, but it happens in everyday scenarios with different people, whether it's like presenting like a project at school, at university, being able to present in front of your colleagues, whatever it may be, there's always going to be those situations that you feel that you can be overwhelmed. There's actually Greg Louganis, who is a diver, is the most successful diver of all time.
Wow.
And he said to me that fear is just excitement without breathing. So sometimes like taking the time to just be present, take a moment to breathe and send to yourself, like we did just before we started. We had a little bit of a breathing moment, and that just, it just takes all of the anxieties away.
Wow.
Or at least allows you to control it a bit better.
I really appreciate that. And I guess, for all of us, we've got here is a wonderful audience. Just so you know, we've got a wonderful audience of HR directors, of people who work in employment benefits and supporting people. Really, that's a common thread that connects everybody in this room and watching aboard, of people who, for their job, to support others and to make sure that they can perform at their best at work generally. So I think there's a really beautiful
exactly. That's the thing with performance. It can be at all different levels, and just because you see other people performing at, like, say, on the world stage, like every single person's performance is in that moment is just as important as any other performance. So I think you always just have to have that perspective as well.
Something that I often experience is a feeling of, who the hell am I to be doing this?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a common thread of that, but that feeling of a bit of an imposter in any given scenario. And then you kind of psych yourself up, or you fake it, or whatever it might be. And And there's moments, you get moments of validation. You know, someone says, oh, well done, or gives you a pat on the back, or, you know, you achieve a good set of results, or, you know, a good board meeting. I can only imagine that the validation that comes from winning Olympic gold is, you know, it's a pretty good validation.
Yeah.
Do you still get that feeling of, you know, who am I in the room? Or now that you've reached that stage?
Totally. Especially just before winning the gold at the Olympics, every time I went to a competition, like even if I would go to a room, some people would already say, "Oh, you're Olympic champion," like, and I'm like, "Well, actually, I've not won it yet." And then I would feel bad, like that people would even think that, and then you always feel, and also with the other divers in my team as well, like Jack Law in 2016, he won an Olympic gold medal with his synchro partner Chris Mears before I'd won a gold medal with Matty. So it was then I always felt even more of an imposter, and like I was like, oh my gosh. But then I was the one that had like the sponsorship deals, and then it like really did weigh on me quite a lot, honestly. And after that Olympic gold, the next morning was probably the first morning in the 21 years that I've been diving that I finally woke up with like a sense of like peace, like wow, like I'm finally comfortable with everything that I've achieved, because that was just like the one thing that had eluded me for so long.
And has that feeling persisted, or has it escaped you again?
Yeah, like I think it's definitely in the world of diving, like I feel very at peace with what I've done in my career. I do think that now I feel really lucky to have found like a second passion in my life, and that is with knitting. And it's not, and I know it sounds really straight, like if somebody had told me 5 years ago that I'd been talking about knitting, I was like, what are you doing? But there is something about it that like it's my mindfulness, it's my way of like calm and peace. And I think honestly I do link that to being able to be in the right frame of mind to like win an Olympic gold medal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I guess if I was to draw out a message from that, it's each domain that you find yourself in, it's coming to peace with your own expectations for it.
Yeah, and I also think there's something really powerful about having something outside of what you do every day, because there's there's your work life and the thing that you do because you have to in order to pay the bills, but then having something that you really enjoy for yourself. What is the thing that you love to do? I know everyone says I love my job and I love work, and that's great. Everyone loves their job.
Well, you like people in the audience.
But there's also really something really important to do something just for the love of it, just for the passion of it, and just for something that there's no like money involved in it. You can just do it, and also just like not be very good at it, and that's totally fine. I think there's something that's really like important about being able to take yourself out of the situation that's stressful and just do something just for you.
Wow, amazing. And is that something you practice like every day? Practice, I guess, pick us up.
Yeah,
you do that every day?
Yeah, I mean, that's what knitting and crochet started for me as, and that's why like I always try and challenge myself within that. Like I always try to learn, at every project I do, I try to learn a new skill, or I try to add something in. Like this year, I want to learn how to like use a sewing machine so I can like make my own clothes. So it's not just like knitting. I mean, knitting takes a long time to make anything. So I watch
my wife.
And I love it. Yeah, exactly. But I love it. But it's just like, I would love to be able to, I don't know, create something with like fabric as well and be able to sew things together, or adjust trousers,
So, Are you announcing here for the first time the Tom Daley fashion label?
Yeah, that's what I need. That's what I need to do. But the thing is, that's one thing. Like, I would love to do a fashion label and have that whole thing. You heard it here, guys. You heard it here first. But I also don't want to do it and not have an understanding of how it works. Like that's why I wanted to be able to really like learn how the fundamentals, because I didn't go to university. I was going to go to university, but then with diving, it all kind of got during 2012 was when I was doing my A levels, and then like after that, like I was thinking, am I going to go to university? But then I decided not to, because there weren't any diving pools near the universities I wanted to go to. So it became complicated. But I ended up moving to London, which means I probably could have gone to university, but that was a couple of years later.
Right. And in terms of, you've been very public about it. In terms of taking a break from diving, because the way you're talking about it, and obviously, as everyone knows, that's such a big part of obviously your identity growing up, of all your professional success, the weight of all these expectations, and quite publicly, you took a bit of a break, and a step back from diving for a while.
Yeah,
Talk to me about how the decision in leading up to that first.
It was actually before 2016. I said to my coach that I was going to take like 6 months off afterwards. And then 2016 didn't quite go as well as I had hoped. And then I ended up coming back after 4 months. But, there was something that was really important to me about having a prolonged break, because normally we would only have like 2 weeks off each year.
Wow.
So we'd do our main competition and then we'd have 2 weeks off. But in those 2 weeks, it's only really towards the end of those 2 weeks that you start to switch off from that everyday habit of like getting up, going to the pool, training, and then all of a sudden you're right back into it and you're in full swing. So in the lead up to Tokyo, I had said that I'm definitely going to be taking a year as a minimum, and almost like forcing myself to rest, because like my body needed it, my mind needed it, and I mean, what, we're 18, 19 months on from the Olympics and I still haven't set foot on a diving board. Really? So, but I've been really enjoying spending more time with my family, being able to explore other opportunities, be able to do other things with like knitting and crochet, and there's just something that's like, I don't know, it's felt very liberating to be able to kind of do something for myself. And I think, obviously I'm very privileged to be able to like just take 18 months off of what I normally do, but I'm also doing other things that are like, and at a certain point I always have to like figure out what and prepare for what's going to come next after diving, because I can't do this dive forever, because I'm already like the granddad in the team.
Really?
Because, I'm like the oldest by a lot.
Makes me feel very old. I'm only 34.
But I go into competitions and I am like the oldest in the event quite often. Wow. So it's and it's weird because I started as one of the youngest, and then I knew it was going to happen at some point, but like it happens quickly. So
people thinking about changing, because obviously HR professionals and people who support others are often asked about, I'm not quite happy in my job, or I'm thinking of changing careers. Everyone's situation is completely different, of course, and not everyone is privileged to be in exactly the same level of stature in your profession. But how would you help someone go about thinking through that decision of what to do next or how to change?
Yeah, I think often like people get really scared and worried about change. And for me, change brings with it its own challenges, but it also brings new opportunity. And I think people are so often worried about the negative impacts of what that change might bring to them, but actually don't often think about what positives can come from a change. I've had to change lots of things even just within my diving career. Like I moved to London, I changed coach. I also had to deal with like learning a new dive that nobody had done before. And, with change comes risks, but then with like risks, there's rewards sometimes. And I think it's just the way, again, it all comes down to perspective, I think, and the way that you frame change in your mind as it being this big thing that has more negatives, or if it's this big thing that could have this big positive change on the other side.
Right, I appreciate that. Yeah. And again, this is something that has been, we really try, and our fundamentals of our business is about each person's well-being journey is different. And it's not one size fits all. You don't have to have any particular one type of workout or one type of health and well-being experience. Everyone's is personalized. Yeah. Look, you've probably had at different times in your life one of the most intense training regimes ever. Yeah. What did that look like? Like, what was it?
It was pretty intense. We do 6 hours a day, 6 days a week of training. But it was very difficult to fit in anything like for my life on top of that. So forever I defined myself as a diver, but that was when I started to figure out what I needed to do outside of the pool in order to be able to give me that sense. Because when you have just one thing in your life, if that thing goes wrong, then your day is ruined. Whereas if you have other things that you're looking forward to in the day, you can start to compartmentalize those things. So when one thing in your day goes wrong, it's not the end of your day. There's other things that you can bring yourself back in. And that's something that I had to learn to do, was to create those everyday healthy habits. You have to have those things that you look forward to at the end of each day, those things that you are able to look forward to when you get home. So if you've had a bad day at work, you can leave that at the office and come back and reset yourself. Because I try my best to never go to bed either angry at my husband ever, like never go to bed on an argument, and also never to go to bed feeling like you've wasted a day. Yeah. And that can literally just be a 10-minute meditation at the end of the day. Like even just like that, or do something for yourself, like cook yourself something, or whatever it may be, just do something for you at the end of each day or throughout the day to make it so that every day has that, you're growing, I guess.
Hearing that from you is really, really nice, because I think each of us tie up our own sense of self in stuff that we do or like our jobs, and you know, your identity for in most of the world is like Tom Daley, diver.
Exactly.
Like coming back after you've had a bad dive that day.
Yeah.
Have you been able to do that? Like,
Yeah, that's something that that's one of the things that we work with a lot on our sports psychology. Like in our diving competition, we have 6 dives. So that could be then 6 meetings. I get if I'm trying to relate it to something like corporate. But what we always had to learn is that those 6 dives are all independent events. They do not affect the next one. So if you do your first dive, whether it's really good or really bad, the next dive is a completely new dive and a completely new start. And not to think of your competition as a whole, think about it, breaking it down into individual dives. So for example, if I did like a really good dive, the next dive, not to take that for granted, thinking, oh, I'm having a good day, so I'm just gonna go with it. Just forget that dive and go on to the next one, and just trying to be present and in the moment is the thing that we always have to bring diving back to, because at the end of the day, it's a very psychological sport. Like you've done all your training and it's just about who has it here to be able to perform on that day.
What's your routine leading up to a dive? Like you've got the world watching, quite literally. You're in your Speedos. That doesn't probably diminish the anxiety. You've got the world watching you in your Speedos, and you're climbing a really tall ladder, and you're standing there in front of potentially hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, it is odd. I mean, it is odd to have a job where I wear more clothes to bed than I do to work. But I get to...
A bit disappointed in this.
Yeah, I know. I often get like, I didn't recognise you with all your clothes on. Like, I get that quite a lot. But the routine actually starts before the competition even starts. So I always have like everything laid out. I have like the place where I'm going to sit, the place where I've got my bag, the place where I've got like my water and snacks throughout the competition, because sometimes the competitions can be quite long. And then in recent years, like my knitting as well, I bring along with me. But what I end up doing is having that sense of security in my little bubble where I'm waiting in between dives. And then like 10 divers before, I'll go up to my coach, ask for a little coaching comment, things to think about. Then I go to the bottom of the stairs. I have a bit of my like water, and then I go, every time a diver goes, I go up a level of the platform. And then when I get to the 5 meter, I do a visual run through. So I cover my eyes and I actually imagine myself doing the dive with my eyes closed. So it's like a bit of a rehearsal, if you like. And then I go up to the next level and then I do a physical run through where I actually practice all of the movements with like what I'm going to do. Again, a bit like a visualization. And then at the back of the board, before the last diver goes, I do 10 really like big deep breaths, like as a form of being able to, again, bring back in what Greg said, that fear is just excitement without breathing. So bringing that breathing in to be able to relax myself so that I can just be, because you want to be pumped up and ready to go, but you also can't be at the same time. It's like you want that
adrenaline without anxiety.
Exactly. So it's a fine balance. But then once you find that, it's just about zoning everything out. And the diving is a weird thing because they announce your name and then there's like, you know, a cheer from your teammates and everyone. And then there's like a referee's whistle and then it's like silent. And then it's like nobody is allowed to make noise again until you hit the water. So it can be very like, it's like everything's fine and then all of a sudden it just goes and you're like, it's you. And you know that everyone in that building is watching you, which is a little bit terrifying sometimes. But that's the thing that you have to shut out. You have to kind of let go of all of that and just, it's just you, the board and the water, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit, I'm feeling a little bit anxious just hearing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Your own personal journey throughout this.
Yes.
And this is obviously, you know, tell me if I'm pushing a bit too
No, you go for it.
You've been on your own journey of sharing your identity as you've gone through your professional career in a very public forum.
Yes.
And I'd love to understand a little bit more from you about the decisions or the thought process that went into the decision to come out, to share that, you know, your full self with the world.
It was a very scary time. Like, I mean, I had just done the Olympics in London 2012. And then I was suffering already from like post-Olympic blues, which is just something that happens when you like build up to something and then all of a sudden it's not there and you have to wait another 4 years. It's like, it's quite like a big come down. And then I was, figuring out my sexuality, but then I was also under pressure because I didn't really know what the like I was so worried about meeting people because I didn't want to be outed and I didn't know who I could trust, when I could trust people. And so it was a very terrifying experience. And then I met Lance, my now husband, and we were dating for like 9 months before I decided that, you know what, I don't want to hide anymore. I had told my friends and family like a month into our relationship. But then it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't want to hide who I am. Like, I'm not ashamed of who I am. I want to just be me. And the one way that I thought I'd be able to do that without anyone asking any follow-up questions or being able to twist my words was doing a YouTube video. And I just literally got my phone and started talking to it. And I uploaded it on the 2nd of December, 2013. So coming up for 10 years ago now, which is kind of crazy. I had lots of people telling me, don't do it. You'll lose sponsorship. You're going to like lose all your fan base. Then you're not going to be able to compete in certain countries. And it was all of this. So it was a lot. And I had lost my dad in 2011 to a brain tumor. And then even at the time, my management were like, you know, you've got to support your family now. Like, what happens if this? And so there was a lot that was like weighing down. But then I just got this moment where I was like, you know what, I can't hide who I am anymore. And it's like, if you don't like it, lump it. Like I got to the point where I feel like some people just get to a breaking point where you're just like, oh, like I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'm going to do it. But it was this feeling of like finally being able to feel free and like unshackled and just be like, I can be me. And then my diving started getting better because I didn't have that extra burden of worry on me. But obviously not everyone is in the position to be able to just come out and have I was very lucky with the reception that I got from like the public, and everyone was so supportive, and my family were. So it's that, and yeah, I mean, again, living in the UK, you have that privilege to be able to not have too severe ramifications, but yeah.
Wow, and was there anyone, of course, you know, your husband Lance,
yes.
It was probably your first long-term serious boyfriend then?
Yes, it was the first long-term relationship I'd ever been in, because I didn't see myself as a relationship person because I was so diving focused, but then I was like, maybe I was so diving focused because I was worried about what that relationship might look like. So I was just like diving, and I was like trying to push away everything. And actually it was just, you know, sometimes you just have to surrender yourself to like what the reality is. And yeah, I mean, now we've been married for 6 years in May. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
We have a little 4.5-year-old. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
That leads me on very nicely. It's like everyone has challenges balancing career and profession with parenting. That might look a little bit different when you're competing at elite sport level, but you know, how do you guys balance? Because also Lance is has his own profession and his own career. How do you guys balance that sort of parenting with?
It's tough, like, because Lance is a filmmaker and mainly spends lots of time writing, so he spends a lot of time at home. But it's obviously difficult because there's one thing spending time at home and being able to not have to work and just spend time with Robbie, and that's fun. Like last week for half term, not week before last was half term, like we had a great time. But it can be challenging. But at the same time, when I was diving, Robbie we used to take him to nursery. So I would take him to nursery on the way to my training session. I would do my first training session, lunch, second training session, and then go pick him up at 4 o'clock on the way home. So it was like this, constant, like drop off, train, eat, train, back to pick him up, back home, you know, food, bed, like, it's, you know, it's
pass out to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. It was the same every day. But when you get into that routine, it becomes easier. Again, it's just bringing it back to trying to make it as simple as possible. But then it gets complicated when I go away then for like 2 weeks at a time for competitions. So then my mum has been a great help as well, because although she lives in Plymouth, so then she would come up 4 hours, like if I was away, and then also with the time difference where Lance's industry is all in Hollywood. So it's like 8 hours time difference. So then all the phone calls start like at 5 p.m. So then it's complicated. But then again, families know you just make it work. You have to. So, and they're the number one priority. So.
And in terms of your parenting style, and now you've clearly, you know, picked up a lot of psychological insights, sports psychology, and a lot of that kind of feeds into parenting and in general. How do you What messages are you trying to pass on to Robbie through that?
Well, I really do feel bad because I think I've passed on a lot of competitiveness to Robbie.
Okay.
Everything is a competition. It's like he'll come up and he's like, Papa, I've got a challenge. The challenge is who can build the biggest Lego. And he like does this whole announcement and then he gets up and he's like, I'm going to be on the stopwatch. And it's like, let's just play with the Lego. It's going to be fine. Everything's like a race to get her, which is very sweet. But you know, he says to me, when he grows up, he wants to be a fire engine and a showman.
Nice.
Whatever that means. So we'll see how that goes. But you know, it's funny now to see him become his own person. He's 4.5. He's like at this stage where it's just, I don't know. I know everyone says, oh, this is a really cute age, but but this really is like quite special. Yeah.
It's a very special time, and mine are 9, 6, 3, and 1. So I've got like different parts of that along the journey.
Like that's the whole spectrum.
Whole
really.
spectrum.
Yeah.
It's never a dull day enough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Would you encourage him to compete competitively?
You know, if the thing is for me, like my parents was just so like, whatever you want to do, like I will support you with that. So if ever he shows interest in something, like I think it's important for him to be able to like try it at least a couple of times. But you know, if he wants to get into competition and he shows interest in that, like fine. But like I know how hard sport is, so it's not something I'm going to be like, let's go and learn how to dive, let's go do this. I think the one thing that I did think was really important was him learning how to swim, because I think water safety that was how I got into diving, was because through that segue of water safety, and because we lived in Plymouth, which is right by the water, so my parents wanted me to be able to survive if I accidentally fell into anything. So but yeah, I think Robbie at the moment is very much into his like performing. He loves music and very creative kid, and like in half term we did like a bit of a musical tour, so we went to Matilda and Frozen and Six the musical is his favourite, which is like, sometimes I mean, it's really funny. I know, exactly. He's seen the movie Matilda like many times, and now it's the musical was amazing.
Pretty, if anyone hasn't watched it, it is a brilliant classic.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so we're going to finish off with a couple more quick fire questions.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So the book that's most inspired you over the last year?
Oh gosh. Thing is, over the last year, there's always just one that always comes back to me, and it's again Greg Louganis, and it's not necessarily over the last year, but it's the book that always comes.
Anyway, it's all good.
It's called Breaking the Surface, and it was the first time I remember reading the book, and because Greg, for people who don't know his story, he was a multiple Olympic champion, but he was the diver that hit his head on the diving board in the Seoul Olympics.
Oh, wow.
And he was a closeted gay guy, and at the time was HIV positive, and nobody knew, and he hit his head, and then there was blood in the pool, and people were trying to, and there was a very dramatic period, but like his book was the first book that I'd read where I saw myself in him, in the sense of being a closeted athlete, and it was like that thing of being like, oh, maybe I'm not alone, and maybe just because I am who I am doesn't mean that I can't achieve stuff in my sport. So that for me is a book that's stuck with me for a while.
Yeah. And mantra, do you have like a daily mantra, something that a line or a sentence that you keep coming back to, something that really
I guess other than that, like fear being excitement without breathing, I do like, there was another thing that Leon Taylor, one of my diving heroes from GB, he said to me, I remember one time at national championships I had this like British diving calendar with all of these like senior divers like on it, and I would like go up to them and say, can you sign this, can you like and he wrote in it, Tom, like work hard and success will follow, and I think that's something that I've always very much stuck with.
And success has definitely followed. So thank you very much, Tom. As many of you will know, our mantra at YuLife is love being you, to really be your best self and to bring your best self to every situation. And I think, Tom, you really embody that of someone who tries to bring their full self to everything that they do. And really, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much to all of our online audience for participating in this lovely webinar. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.